The East Area Rapist is building a reputation as Sacramento's worst nightmare. His evil intent matched only by his skill at eluding capture.
He might not necessarily be stalking the victim, but he's stalking the neighborhood. He is very familiar with the areas that he commits his crimes. He has an exit route planned out. He knows each house in that neighborhood. He knows how to navigate in the dark.
I don't think we're looking at the troll under the bridge, looking at a sex registrant that is transient and just moving around and attacking couples. I think we are dealing with somebody that probably has the skill sets to be a relatively successful person in his normal life.
A few witnesses say they have seen him fleeing from one of his many crime scenes or prowling the neighborhood in search of prey. But all police have to go on is a few possible sketches of the most wanted man in town.
What most people don't realize is those are composites that other people said, hey, I saw a strange guy walking in the neighborhood. None of those composites came from the victims because he always had a mask on. So we, to this day, really don't know what his face looks like.
And police believe he finally makes a misstep. And it's a mistake with horrific consequences. A young married couple named Brian and Katie Majori are walking their dog on an early evening when investigators say they encounter the rapist, without his disguise, lurking near a house. Brian is a security officer at a nearby Air Force base, and cops say he may have focused in on the suspect.
He is prowling, looking into maybe some windows, conducting his surveillance. Brian, being a security policeman, I very much believe he would have attempted to intervene and catch this individual.
But it all goes horribly wrong.
Brian is shot and killed in one backyard. It appears that Katie was trying to run through the two backyards to get out through a side gate, where she ends up being caught by the suspect, and he ends up shooting her.
It's a brutal slaying, the first murders linked to the rapist.
I think that in that particular killing, it was to avoid detection and people figuring out who he was.
Cops are all eyes and ears on the street, keeping a sharp lookout for anyone that might remotely resemble the attacker. Several men are questioned and released. And they pick up this man.
Is that the picture of the guy?
Yeah.
Looks like me, doesn't he?
I'm sorry?
He looks like me, doesn't he? Kinda.
He's Michael Bowker, a sometimes crime writer who has, ironically in later years, written much on the very case for which he was questioned.
And how old were you then?
Early 20s, and I was living right in the area where he was striking. I actually was pulled over twice by police when I was jogging because I'm somewhat the characteristics of this guy.
In the years after the East Area Rapist attacks, Bowker says he was hired by Sacramento Magazine to write hard-edged stories.
And I suggested a retro story on the East Area Rapist.
So it was your idea?
It was my idea. And the first time I talked to one of the investigators who had been involved as a rookie, he invited me over to his house.
But he says he had authorities once again scratching their heads and questioning his true identity all those years later.
His wife was a forensic psychiatrist, and they stood on one side of the screen door where I could not see them, but they could see me, and started interrogating me. They thought maybe I was involved somehow and that I had come back to bring it back up again.
What do you mean?
They thought maybe I was the guy. I was the East Area Rapist, coming back to redo the story, to bring it back up again, to bring attention to myself.
Was that true?
No. So I started teasing them, and finally they let me into the house, and we've been friends ever since.
And to be clear, Bowker has never been named as a suspect in any crimes whatsoever. Today, he lives in Goleta, not far from the very homes targeted by the East Area Rapist. And he has put his unpleasant experience with the case to good use.
That's really creepy.
It was very creepy, but for 30 seconds, I felt what it would be like under the spotlight for that. Well, I'm using that feeling in the book that I'm writing.
Maybe you'll get to write the final chapter.
I hope so. It's not a story I look forward to writing.
Back in earlier chapters of his violent spree, the East Area Rapist heads about 90 miles farther south in search of new victims and possibly less heat from the police. And cops have some theories about his changing base of operations as well.
Why do you think he moved down here?
I personally believe that he moved down here because of his job. I think he ended up coming down this area because his occupation changed or his job assignment changed. And studies of serial predators have shown that oftentimes they are doing victim selection during their normal living activities.
Over the following year, he racks up a terrifying tally of up to 18 attacks, most of them involving couples.
For most of the attacks, it appears that he's jumping off the freeway and hitting neighborhoods that are close to the freeway. His MO down here is identical to what we saw in the attacks up in Sacramento.
For now, all of the victims of the home invasion attacks survive. But even though police have not yet connected all the crimes to one man, they still regard the East Area Rapist as the prime suspect in the murders of Brian and Katie Majori, and they fear more bloody encounters yet to come.
Very early on in the series, in fact, some of the early psychologists that were consulted by Sacramento had predicted that this guy would kill.
And their worst fears are about to be realized. Next, the East Area Rapist heads deep into Southern California and transforms into a full-fledged monster with an unquenchable thirst for blood.
It's off the charts. This case is off the chart. You can't believe what this offender does.